Good morning, everybody. Thank you and welcome to Unique Peace. I'm so glad you two can join us today. Today, we're going to be joined by Matt, who is one of the owners for Audio Workstations here on Long Island. He also has a podcast called Local Long Island, and I've been on his podcast. It's a really good podcast. I recommend you check it out, as well as maybe check out the studio. It's a really nice studio as well. So let's welcome Matt to the show. How are you this morning?
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Waking up.
Absolutely. I'm a little extra red colored today because I got out in the sun without a hat yesterday. So if I look like a tomato to your audience, that's the reason why.
Oh, no worries. No worries. So, along, let's start off with how you got to where you are with owning a studio. You had some bumps along the way, as well as some fun along the way.
Sure. I suppose the first version of a studio that I ever had was just a little box about yay big. It was about the size of your computer screen, most likely, and it was a 4-track cassette recorder. And that was when I was like 13 years old, something like that. It was one of the first things I ever bought with money from a summer job. And it was in order to, record stuff. It was pretty much at that time the only way that somebody could record at home was with a cassette recorder. And this particular cassette recorder was made so that you could use not just the 2 tracks that are on the front, which is the left and the right side of the front of the cassette, but you could also simultaneously use the back of the cassette, which meant that you could record like 4 instruments. You could overdub, as we say, 3 additional things onto the first thing that you recorded. And that was my first experience with recording at home at the time. And there was really not a lot of digital technology quite yet. There was still a couple of years before it would be computer dominated. So that's literally where I started, which with the 4-track cassette recorder. I guess if we fast forward, it just kind of goes to some work with computers, getting a computer to do some audio stuff when I was beginning college. And I decided at a certain point, a few years into like normal university, I decided that most universities didn't have a technical audio recording program. There are some, and they
Right.
do exist a bit more now than they did. But at the time, there were really like other schools that I had to consider going to besides the 4-year university. So I was a student at University of Central Florida for a couple of years, and I was kind of hanging in there in the radio and television broadcast program because it was the closest thing I could find to a recording program at the university. And I was
Right.
interested in going to school also at another school in Florida that I believe is still around. And they've gotten bigger since, but at the time they were more of a technical school. And now I think they've evolved into a university. But I would have had to go to 2 schools separately in Florida in order to study this at the time. And so I kind of got frustrated with Florida and came back up to New York because I'm from here originally. And there I found a place called the Recording Engineers Institute, which oddly enough I had never heard of the entire time that I was living here going to high school. I had to like move away and come back to then discover it through a random friend that I ran into on the train, and he told me about it. And so I checked it out. I ended up going there. It was a year-long technical school program. And when I graduated, I was actually asked to teach. There was like, I guess, a confluence of events where my grades were good or they liked me at the same time that somebody was leaving. So there was an opening. And that's sort of where I found a home for a while. I was the head instructor at the Recording Engineers Institute here on Long Island. And I was also able to do freelance audio work out of the studios when classes were not in session. That was like the main benefit of being an instructor there, was the ability to use the studios. And so that was what I did for a long time. And I was training people to go out into the world and run recording studios. But the problem was there were less and less commercial recording studios to go out there and run sessions in. And this is, not to explain the whole history of the music business.
No, it's okay.
This was sort of like on the heels of record companies realizing that they couldn't really sell CDs anymore, and they're still trying to figure that out like 20 years later.
Right.
So the model that was in existence sort of before I came up and learned this was, recording studios would open up. You needed a few $1 million worth of equipment at least. But once you made that investment, as long as you were like the only studio within an X mile radius, then you could maybe rest assured that any serious recording projects that needed to happen in that geographical area, you were the one who was going to get the call from a record label, and they were going to say, we need the studio for a month or 2 months, and they would book it out, and you would, like, your year would be long bookings with some small
Well,
bookings peppered
yeah.
in, and those larger budgets from the big record labels really kind of, supported the traditional recording studio industry. But that model doesn't really happen anymore because record companies don't have large budgets to throw around because they're not selling CDs for $20 any longer. And so, long story short, I realized that, okay, I'm training people to go do a thing that's not as available to do as it once was on a commercial basis. You could still do it, but it's not going to be as many opportunities that are well paid and secure as there might have been a certain number of years ago. So it means that a lot of music recording is happening in the independent realm,
Right.
and it's like self-funded. It's not a whole lot of money getting thrown around, so it's more difficult to sustain a commercial studio based on lots of small budgets versus a few large budget clients. And so I realized that there's not a whole lot of places for people to go work once I finished training them
Right.
in the program. And I sat around thinking about this quite a bit, and it came up with what I thought might be one little scratch in the problem, to try and come up with a solution, which is basically a more affordable co-working studio space. So it's virtual right now because I'm not in the studio physically this morning, but behind me is a picture of one of our studios.
Yep.
And the idea is, I tried to design studio rooms that would be very effective in terms of getting good quality with modern equipment, but not cost so much that they'd be prohibitive, and not be as expensive as a traditional studio. Because the technology, the same way that technology changed in the selling of the music, digital technology also changed the way in which we're able to record, and made it a fair amount less expensive. Not so much like not so much less expensive that you don't have to buy any equipment, but you still have to buy some equipment.
Right.
But maybe you can spend $20,000 on equipment and not $1 million, and that's a big gap to get a functional studio going. So we decided to build some lean and mean studio rooms that were, equipped to do what we needed to do in the modern realm, and offer them basically as a co-working space for anybody who's trained to run a room, whether you're a music producer or a recording engineer. As long as you're capable of turning on some of these buttons and not needing a bunch of assistance, then you can qualify basically to rent one of these rooms, and to do your own work out of it, whether that's working on your own music as just a project that you're working on, or whether you're working as a freelancer, which is kind of what we designed it around, because that's what I was doing at the time, and I still do freelance audio work. And so where do we do that? We try and do that out of a nice co-working space such as Audio Workstations, so that the cost of the studio is a bit more affordable, and that you can actually afford to do a self-funded record.
Beautiful. Thank you for telling us your story. We have Michael watching. He
Hey,
says good
Michael.
morning.
Good morning.
And so this is Unique Peace. So, what brings you peace?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I tend to enjoy a good nature view. Um, so getting maybe sometimes it's tricky because there are moments of peace in the work, but they're sort of like more sporadically peppered in there. Um, there's different aspects to what I do in work. One of them, which is my favorite, is just working with the sound. As much as I love people, um, people's one aspect of recording, and it tends to be that you're dealing with people when you're actually doing the recording part when they're in the studio. But there's a lot of post production that happens in music production. Specifically, mixing and mastering are the two post production phases. And mixing in particular is one that I really enjoy. At that stage of the process, everything's been recorded already and hopefully, knock on wood, edited already. Um, so I get to just work with the sound. I get to just listen to
So
the instruments.
the sound is what really brings you peace.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing what your brain can do when you just put on headphones or sit in front of a pair of speakers and close your eyes and have something actually really good to listen to. It can kind of take your mind to different locations or be in different states that you might not get otherwise, especially when you're hearing something new and that you like. A lot of times people don't properly introduce the right amount of new music into their lives. And I'm not saying I know what the proper amount is. I'm talking like it's a scientific certainty, but I have a hunch that there is some amount of new music that you should integrate. And if you only listen to the same stuff, you'll get bored in that arena of your mind. If you listen to too much new stuff, it's bad too. But one of the things about what I do is a lot of the times it's new original music that's not released, right? That's why I'm working on it, so it can be released. So there's times when if something's really good and I'm sort of bringing it across that threshold of maybe you wouldn't appreciate it because the sonics weren't that great, to now I'm bringing it further down the process, and now like what the intentions of the musicians are starting to shine through into the sonics a little bit, and you can kind of it's really the moment when as a listener you begin to feel the intention of the musicians and the parts that they're playing, because you can hear them in a way that flatters them enough to express themselves. So like you could hear a guitar part and it sounds okay, and then I can use an equalizer on it, and if I do it in the right way, you will start to feel that part more. You will start to feel the intention behind it more, because I'll get the right areas of the guitar, the right frequencies that represent the right notes popping out at the right moment and expressing themselves better. And all of a sudden it starts to go from feeling like it's I'll use the term flat, not in a music theory sense, but just in a not exciting sense. And then you can kind of unlock the sonic potential of it by turning the right knobs on the right tools. And then it starts to speak to you. It starts to say, oh, this is what I do. I groove a little bit like this. I thought you were just playing some boring notes back there, but actually you're doing something groovy. And it's because we kind of lifted the right areas of sound out of it. And I'm just speaking in frequency terms, so lows, mids, and highs, from the right areas within sound to unlock something. It starts to express itself. And then when you take that, I was just talking about it on a singular instrument, but if you kind of extrapolate that to a whole song, when you get all the instruments sort of speaking the way that they're supposed to and expressing their parts, you start to understand the intention of the musicians a little bit better and what they're trying to get across. And so there's that moment when it starts to become like groovy. It starts to sound good and the instrument starts to express themselves. That's sort of like, it's an exciting moment. You asked me about a peaceful moment, but there's also sort of like I'm hearing something that no one has heard yet. I'm hearing it for the first time and I'm hearing what it's supposed to be. So I feel kind of like I have special knowledge at that moment, like almost as if I was like like I had climbed to a particular spot to see a sunrise or sunset, and no one else is looking at it from that exact angle on that exact day. It's like I sort of have this special insight into the music before it's released to the public, and it's and I helped it be worthy of that in some way. And so that's sort of like a peaceful moment in work.
So
And
what's a peaceful moment overall for you?
I'll go right back out to the sunset. So like, you know, beaches, mountains, and vistas otherwise nature laden are sort of the cure for the over saturation of technology. So I definitely, when I'm lacking peace, I'll put it to you that way, I will go and find a spot like that to, to be outside and try and be away from all like the technological trappings of work and stuff.
So how in tapping into those two things. So how does the nature portion of being peaceful um, differ from the technology and
Uh,
knowing when to take that break?
I think when I'm describing the like work piece thing, I happen to be sitting in technology because I have to be, but it's more about like the what the other humans are doing, even though I'm not like they don't have to be in the room with me. It's more about figuring out what's going on with them and the music that they're making, and then the nature thing is more of a reminder of like the I don't want to say the smallness of us in comparison to the nature, but it's sort of it has a way of demolishing too much self-importance. Maybe it's just through physical scale or through beauty or through just like reminding myself that there's a lot of stuff that I don't know to wonder about, and you know what I mean. Like I'll get astrophysicsy and metaphysicsy while looking at nature, because it's easier to be reminded of what is all this when you're out there.
Right, right. And so how do you feel you bring peace to others?
Um, well, hopefully in the dealing with people part, which I just told you I like to get away from when I do my favorite work, but there is an aspect to what I do, and I'll go outside the audio work itself and go over to the teaching of it for this, because um, I don't know if peace is the right word, but I think that maybe we can like there's a lot of things that sort of contribute to the feeling of peace, and maybe one of them is feeling like you understand something a little bit better, or that you can put something that into practice and do something useful with it. And so there's moments of educating, of teaching, where you realize that someone understands something new for the first time and they're excited about it, and you helped. So that is sort of the moment when I feel like maybe I can bring some peace to others, is um, more of a not the quiet, still type of peace, but the piece of like self-reliance, and I know a thing, I can do a thing, so I don't necessarily need to ask others for help with this thing. There's a peaceful power in that, like the letting go of some of the needing others for things, and often I'm dealing with people who are learning something like audio engineering because they want to be more self-reliant as a musician.
Right.
And so, if you're a musician, you want to record your music and get it out there into the world. If you are having to rely on a professional audio engineer, that is maybe a source of stress if you don't have the ability to afford one all the time for every time that you want to record. So for a certain percentage of musicians who feel that they can sort of dedicate some of their brain to the technical aspect, then it can be empowering to be able to record yourself as opposed to relying on someone else.
So there's a piece in helping others find their own self-reliance, and there's a piece in the teaching, like I contributed to
You got it. It's
your
an
knowledge.
excellent summary.
And why do you find that peaceful?
I don't know. I guess I'm sort of just like grabbing at all the best like brain feelings and sort of putting them under the umbrella of peace for the sake of our conversation, because I think that it's a broad enough word where the meaning of it can kind of fit what I'm talking about a little bit. I don't know if you agree, but there's like a narrow definition of peace, like, hey, we're not fighting, we're not at war, but then there's sort of like deeper, broader meanings that you can ascribe to it as sort of like an aspirational state in general, things like the states that you'd rather be in.
Right. Aside from music, teaching people music, how else do you feel you bring peace to others outside of the music industry?
Hopefully with some interpersonal communication stuff, there's definitely been times where I've had to sort of mediate between parties just in my personal life, whether it's family or friends or whatever, where there's a bit of not getting along going on, and I have to literally try and bring peace in that narrow definition that we were talking about. It's not always possible. It's not always really even my responsibility, but I tend to try and do that if possible.
Try and be the peacekeeper.
Try to be the peacemaker, the mediator, the person who understands where everyone is coming from, even when the other people don't understand where one another are coming from. So yeah, that's my attempt at peacemaking, peacekeeping in my personal life.
So, in another question I love to ask is if somebody is in the studio, they're really stressed out, they feel that they have a deadline or they have an actual deadline, they're kind of getting stressed out. What's in Matt's toolbox that he can pull out that can help this person find peace really quickly?
Uh, well, I'm guilty of making puns quite constantly, and so I tend to use humor in the studio to break tension. I found a long time ago that if you have a nervous singer, um, one of the best things you could do is make them laugh right before they start to sing, even if it's a really serious song. It seems counterintuitive, but if you can get someone who's nervous to laugh just before they're about to start singing, because it's a little different than on stage, right? If we were on stage and I made you giggle while the audience was staring at you before you started to sing, it would be awkward. But in the studio, we can cut anything out, before the first line of the song. So, I can say if there's a four measure introduction or something, I have time to say something silly, have the artist laugh, and then just put them in a better state of mind before performing, feel more comfortable in general, let some of the nerves go, because nervousness doesn't translate well on recording. There's not a lot of times where the goal is to sound nervous.
Right.
There's not a lot of songs about being nervous where you have to sound nervous. I mean, that's a good challenge for a songwriter, but so if you can let that tension go just before the singing, there tends to be this like focus that kicks in. And that's one trick, is using humor. Another one is just taking a walk around the building.
Yeah. And I've been to your building, so it's like if you're lost and you're stressed out, you can just park your car and walk around until you find the front door.
Yeah, it's just a circle. So
I've, I've been there, man. I've been like, I don't know where I'm at. I literally had to call E to find the front of the door. Front
yeah, it
door.
happens. It's funny. They try to psych everyone out by putting the door in the front of the building, but it's really the side of the building because the building is turned on a weird angle.
Yep.
So it's like we're facing the street, which would ordinarily be the front, which would ordinarily be the first place that people look when they drive somewhere. But because the building is on its side, people just drive right by the door and don't see it.
Yes, I'm guilty.
But yeah, take a walk around, say hi to the cats that live by the parking lot, because they do hang out there.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, overall, what do you find to be your happiest moments?
Oh, well, happiest moments are probably sort of aligned with the nature peaceful moments, especially if I can, like have someone there who's also enjoying. um, yeah, I tend to enjoy, uh, you know, getting away from stuff as long as I have a hat and I don't get sunburned like I did yesterday. um, getting out into nature tends to create the happiness, and I tend to forget to do it sometimes, and I have to remind myself and ask myself when was the last time I did something, you know, like a walk that ends in a view of the ocean. So I guess that tends to be my happy place.
So, nature is your happy
I
place.
think so. Yeah, I think it's safe to say.
Right. And is there anything you would like to share with the listeners and viewers regarding peace and how to find it?
Um, I don't know if I'm qualified to give peace finding advice to anyone other than myself, because I think everyone's so individual and unique in that way. I mean, yes, we're all human, so maybe there's more commonality than I think. But um, I will add that although I don't get to concerts that often, when I can experience live music without some like obvious sonic flaw that's going to bug me, because that's a difficulty. If I am experiencing live music that's really, really well played and it sounds really good, I actually tend to close my eyes when I go to concerts that are really good. It seems weird because everyone's like, well, you're paying to see the band. And I'm like, not really. I'm paying to hear the band. And the visual can be a distraction for me from really hearing what they're doing. So that I tend to, if I can close my eyes at a really good concert and just hear the music without being distracted by what the sound guy's doing and critiquing him from behind his back, because that plagues me. If I can get there and I can just enjoy and close my eyes, it's almost similar to the nature experience, where like something's happening, I'm not in control of it. It's great though, and I'm enjoying it.
Good, good. There is a lot to be said for the sonics in life.
Mm-hmm.
So as a poet, I totally understand that when you get the right rhythm and you get the right stanza and how that comes through, because poetry writing and songwriting can be very similar, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to get the right when something is you got the proper alliteration or the right onomatopoeia and you move forward. It's actually a beautiful thing. You
Yeah.
can tell when something is poorly written. It I correct it.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Absolutely. I did a lot of like before I wrote music so much when I was a lot younger. I had like a binder of poetry, and some of it got melodically infused, and some did not.
yes. Yes. And we've got, and Michael has a nice analogy.
I'm not sure which one, because I tend to like feel like I'm always talking in analogy, but I appreciate it.
So I want to
Or it could
thank
have been
you.
your analogy. Sorry, it could
It
have been
could have,
your, yeah,
it could have been
50
mine.
50 50. It's selfish of me to assume I'm the good analogizer here.
No worries, no worries. um, so I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy morning, this beautiful Sunday.
Thank you for having
And
me.
I'm going to put you back in the green room for a
All
minute.
right, here I go.
Woo. So I want to thank all of you for listening today. I hope you learned something new about peace, finding peace through music and through nature. And on Tuesday, I will have special guest Dr. Fred Moss. He is a retired psychiatrist who is now calling himself the Undoctor. And Michael was reminding us, comparing the concert to nature. So I want to wish you all a peaceful weekend and Sunday morning, and I will see you on Tuesday.